You're a man that controls his own destiny. A man that is always in the pursuit of being better. You are in the right place. You are responsible. You are strong. You are a leader. You are a force for good. Gentlemen, you are the Alpha, and this is the Alpha Quorum.
Welcome back to the Alpha Quorum Show. Brad Singletary here. This is another special one. I've got my nephew, Andy Giddings, here from Idaho Falls. He came down just this weekend just for us to record a few things here. And it happens to be, I guess, Hurricane Hillary is on the way up through LA and coming up through this part of the country. So we had a lot of rain here. We're all bunkered down here in the Alpha Quorum headquarters. We welcome you back. We're going to be talking about attitude today. Before we get started, I want to invite you to just like and subscribe and turn on the notifications wherever you may be listening to this to, so that you can be notified when we post new content. So appreciate you being with us today. And now we're going to get started with Andy. Welcome back to Vegas. Andy grew up in Vegas for the most part of your childhood, right? I mean, How old were you when you moved here?
I don't know. I think I was like 10 or 11 when I moved here. And then we moved when I was 16.
16, you left out of here. Yeah, that's when some of the trouble started. That maybe we were talking earlier about that may have been part of the move from here to smaller town, Idaho. And even there, you seem to find some trouble. We had a really great episode with Andy before too, actually, where he talked about his experiences in prison, how he got there, how he fell down the path of criminal stuff and also, substance use and the damage that did, and then how he repaired himself in prison, and how he, part of that is why he's so involved with this now, because he's really matured a ton and he's willing to do some help. So he's the producer of the Alpha Quorum Show. So if you have any feedback for us, or there are certain things you want to hear about, email Andy. It's andy@alphaquorum.com. And you may be able to find him also on social media too. So thanks for being here, dude. This is different. We did our other videos by video, but to have you right here in the flesh, man, this is good to have you here. You look good. You work out in the sun. You're always fit and tan, and like, geez, make me look like a chump.
Yeah, man, it's good to be here, man. I'm excited. The Alpha Quorum's definitely changed my life in a lot of ways, and on the way here, actually, it was a super turbulent flight. There's a lot of turbulence coming into Vegas, and then we had to circle for about an hour. And the woman sitting next to me, we didn't talk a whole lot. I was plugged in listening to audiobooks and making notes for the show. And but the last hour, she was struggling. She was getting sick, and
the turbulence.
Yeah. So she wound up. There's like 10 people that wound up puking on the plane. Oh my God. Just circling Vegas, and so I started talking her through it, and I was, just coaching her through it, helping her, reminding her to breathe and stuff. Mm-hmm. And once she kind of calmed down, she apologized and she was crying. I was like, it's all right. Hey, don't worry about it. Like, just making small talk. And then she asked me what brought me to Vegas, and I told her, I'm the producer for the Alpha Quorum podcast. And she got super excited, saying that her husband listens to the show, and they're from Driggs, Idaho.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know, I kind of half thought that, maybe she was just
being nice.
Nice,
oh, yeah, well, I know that one. Yeah.
But then she's like, no, he's really into the masculinity thing. And he starts name dropping and stuff. She mentioned your name, and that her husband's having their son read, a book about becoming a man,
mm-hmm.
And then she texted her husband and showed me, that he was all excited that she was sitting next to the producer of the Alpha Quorum.
Wow, dude, you're famous. Look at this. Meeting a guy on a plane to talk about what you're doing here in Vegas, and they know what you're doing. That's got to be so, like, that's a nice little victory right there for us, just to know that there are people out there. We have a smaller audience, but it's growing all the time. And I'm just glad to have you here in person, man. I got to say, though, this guy acts like he's a hard worker. So he was like, all right, we were up till like 1 or 2 in the morning. He's like, all right, I'm getting up at 8. At 8:15, I'm like, oh man, maybe he's in the shower, I'll just leave him alone. And then like 11:15, he finally texts me. He's upstairs in my house, and he finally texts me to say, "Oh, sorry, bro, my phone died." And I give you that break, man. We need our rest. And so anyway, one of the things that, we talk about in the Alpha Quorum is looking at your attitude, actions, and attributes. They all start with an A. We kind of got to make a nice little model that works. But I think it really is how we live our lives. We have an attitude about things, and we're going to dive into this really deeply today, but we have an attitude, and we'll define that more. And then that affects our actions. Our actions are based on our attitude. And then over time, that creates the attributes that we live with, that we're known by. One of these days, there's going to be a funeral service, and hopefully people there can include some of the things that we taught you about the attributes that you have developed and have shaped in yourself over time. So let's dive in here to attitude and just trying to pick apart what that is and how that affects what we do and how we live our lives. Andy, what do you got on this topic?
So yeah, man, I've done a little bit of research on this, and when it comes to the attitude, there's that chart that goes from attitude leads to action, leads to experience, and your experience leads to thoughts leads to beliefs, and then the cycle repeats itself. And, in my personal experiences, I've never really, until recently, I've never thought back to what my attitude was in those situations in my life, like in prison or leading up to prison or running a business. And then reflecting back on where my attitude was in any one of those circumstances or situations, I can now see why I failed or why I succeeded. And, I went to prison a couple of times, and the first 2 times I went, I had a terrible attitude, and I had a terrible attitude coming out. I had a very negative, shame-driven attitude, and that's where the relapse came from, and that's where the poor decisions, came from. And so when I went back the last time, I went in to county jail and prison with a different attitude. It wasn't necessarily positive or negative. It was more positive than previously, but it was different. It was more driven, I guess, to fix myself. And so, but I still had a lot of negative attributes. And in that process of working on myself, I can now see, looking back, how my attitude was dramatically increased by the different, thoughts and beliefs, right? When you go from, what you're thinking about, and then, like I said earlier, the thoughts is the accumulation of things that you just throw at the wall, and the stuff that sticks on the wall are the beliefs, right? And so when I developed certain beliefs, that's what shaped my attitude. And that's why this last stint in prison was so positive and so good for me and everyone that was around me. And the better attitude and the type of attitude that I had as far as helping others as well as helping myself led to a specific set of actions that, helped me help other men, right?
Yeah. So if we want to improve ourselves, I think this is a really important step, is just to understand where we're sitting in our attitude. And earlier we were talking about this topic, and you were mentioning that, with this cycle, there's no real beginning, and it begins over every day, every experience we have. Maybe this is a lifetime cycle. It's just that there's no beginning to it necessarily. I wonder about experiences as the beginning, because we start out with no attitude. When we're babies, when we're toddlers and younger kids, it's not really set necessarily yet. We can have an attitude or a perception of something that's happening in the moment. But I think we get these, I think some of our attitude is shaped by experiences. So in this model, after experiences comes a thought about the experience. So something's happened. Someone's done me wrong, or I've won the game, whatever the experience is. And then what do we do with that? It sounds like we're having to kind of really interpret the thing. We have a thought that's different than a belief. A thought is maybe momentary or a short-term version of, it's like a conclusion that we draw in the moment.
Yeah.
I won the game, and my thought might be, I'm a stud. I lost the game. My thought might be, I'm a loser. So how does that become the next part? We have a thought about the experience. How does that turn into a belief?
Oh yeah, man. Well, and I like what you just said there about, I won the game and now I'm a stud. Well, and think about, the people that are uncommon amongst the uncommon, right? So you think about Kobe Bryant. He won the game and he's not a stud. He won the game and he said, all right, I got to go to bed because I got to practice at 4 a.m. Or like if I'm training a dog, like, especially when I was in prison, I would, train these dogs. I would have a list of goals. I would exceed every single one of them. And all of my guys are on point. My dog is on point. This dog is about to be adopted. And he passed every test with flying colors. And I don't say good job, or I don't think, all right, well, now that's over. That's my mindset is, okay, now we got to clean the house, got to clean the kennels. We got to get ready for the next one.
Next. Yeah.
Yeah. And so another thing about mindset and attitude and all of these things is like, if you look at hyper successful people, they set goals, right? But by the time they achieve their goal, they don't even care because they've already moved on to the next goal. I mean, there's a process, and then there's a point in the process where if you're striving to be successful and you're already in that good mindset, right? And you're trucking along, and you're obviously going to meet failure along the way, but about 3/4 of the way through the process, you've already created a new set of goals because you're about to achieve what you've already set out to do. And so, and that's one thing with action is that's doing something to achieve what you're aiming at, right? And so, if you have the thoughts that turn into a belief, your belief then turns into your attitude through, how you behave, and then your behavior then drives what you're going to do about the belief or about whatever it is you set your goal as. And then that creates the experience. And then the experience for me, like in prison or lately being a mentor and things like that, the experience is what teaches me also. And that's also what keeps the attitude positive. And so we have the experience, we have a thought that's kind of a temporary, you mentioned, throwing something against the wall. That's just a temporary, it's a momentary, literally this could be 1 second. Your thought is very short, but sustained over time, those thoughts become beliefs. And that's like a broader interpretation of life, of myself, of the world, of other people. I have beliefs about women. I have beliefs about, whatever thing's going on. And it's just like this, that's the programming now. My beliefs are the programming. But I had a hard time wondering earlier, what's the difference between a belief and an attitude? So we talked about the difference between a thought and a belief. A thought is short-term. A belief is like this rule or this conclusion that you've drawn about life or yourself. How then is an attitude different? When I think about that, I think about something Andy said earlier before the show here. He said, well, I can't feel your beliefs. You're walking around with beliefs in your head. I can't feel those necessarily, or I can't notice that your beliefs, but I notice your attitude. And I think there's something it's like in your body. Maybe there's an emotional component to it. So I can believe
I'm a piece of shit, nobody likes me. That's a belief. But if that becomes my attitude, it's like it's energy now that I'm projecting it. There's some frequency in me. I don't even know the words to call this, but it's fascinating to kind of, dissect this a little bit, because I think that the attitude really is the belief mixed with your subjective, like, feelings experience. I don't know. What do you think of what I'm saying there?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, look at me, for example. Like, I'm not in the worst shape in the world, but I won't take my shirt off in public. No,
Okay.
You wouldn't be able to tell that I struggle with body dysmorphia, and I think I'm super ugly and super,
you're kind of ugly.
Well, yeah. I mean, I feel like, because I believe that, I know that's not, I know that it, A, doesn't matter, but B, I also know that other people don't judge me like that, but I still believe it. And if, I'm walking into Home Depot or whatever, and I mean, nobody would take a look at me and think that I have that belief about myself, because I hold myself with confidence and stuff. And so, but then the attitude part of that. So we went to a public swimming pool last week, and I wouldn't take my shirt off. And I most assuredly know that through my behavior, at least my immediate family could tell. And that something was going on, because my attitude had changed, my confidence had changed, my behaviors had changed. And I think that's the difference is, again, your beliefs are inside your head, and your attitude is the behaviors reflected off of the beliefs. And so, I think that would be the difference.
So people noticed. You're saying you go into the park or the pool and you're not ready to take your shirt off, but maybe you think you should. This is a swimming pool. I'm here with my family. That's what people do, but I'm not doing it. And you're having this whole battle, and there's some shame or some body image stuff there, you're saying. And so the belief can be private. Your attitude is going to be visible, and it's going to affect what you choose to do in the action step, which comes next,
and how you carry yourself and all these things, and, I mean, eventually I acclimated to the situation, and I was able to go swimming with the kids, and I made it so, the youngers didn't, couldn't like tell. I didn't want to make them feel weird. So, but I mean, in other spectrums in life, like, whether it be in academia, like if people are going to college, or they're going to university and they're taking, psychology, but they are terrible in math, but you have to do it. Their confidence is going to be different. Their attitude is going to be different. And so I think attitude, I mean, you have a different attitude in each area, right? You're like, both in general in life, when you're in your most comfortable state, hanging out with your family or your friends or at work or whatever. But then you go to church, your attitude might change a little bit. Your stature changes, and again, like you said, we could dive really deep into it. There's a lot going on with mindset and behavior cycles and stuff, but
yeah, I think I believe, this is my theory here, that the attitude is the embodiment of the beliefs. So there's physical energy to it. Our emotions it's just a charge going on inside our body. Motion. What did Jimmy say in one of the recent episodes? That thoughts are the language of the mind.
Yep.
Emotions are the language of the body. And
right.
So the attitude that's what that's what she could pick up on. Whoever noticed that you weren't in the best space, because it's turned into physical energy now. You're like literally emanating this like vibe,
yeah, and
people feel that. And so, I remember when I first got together with my wife, I had some reasons to, have some anxiety about relationships. I'd just come out of a marriage, and I remember there were times when I would show up at her place. I would go over to her apartment, and I would be anxious, and I would be anxious about our status and anxious about what she had been doing and whatever. And she, without even saying a word, she would kind of, it repelled her. My attitude, which I'm walking in there with kind of a fearful, insecure attitude. 0 words spoken, 0 actions taken. She felt it. So I think that the attitude is it's kind of the cloud or the burst of light that you're walking around with. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's the how much what's being illuminated through like physical energy. Does that make sense? I really think there's something to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's almost like, you know, that's how empathic people can, you know, pick up on vibes, right? Like your attitude is what empathy is extracting out of another person. And that, I mean, so, and that's why people say good vibes only and stuff like that. I mean, you know, because there is a vibe like, hey, you go to prison, there's a vibe in this facility, there's a vibe in this facility, there's a vibe in this facility. So when I went from gangland, right, like when I went from Boise to Givens Hall, which is a firefighter camp and a dog training place and a work camp, minimum security, I mean, totally different. People say, excuse me, people are, you know, the whole vibe was different. Everything was different. I mean, people were freaking nice. You know, there wasn't a lot of politics there, but the vibe was different. People's attitudes were different. And so, I mean, you're able to kind of relax a little bit when you get from maximum medium security to minimum security. And your attitude changes based on everyone else's attitude around you, you know? And you know, there's a million different scenarios like that, but it's like that church too, you know, the vibe is different in sacrament rather than, you know, going to teach at a young men's class or whatever, or if you're going to Bible study or whatever, or even at work, you know, boss shows up, the vibe changes, you know, boss goes away, leaves the job site, and now everybody else is a little bit more relaxed. And so,
so the environment that we're in, the people that we're surrounding ourselves with, the intention of the purpose of where we are and what we're doing, that can affect your attitude, like the different populations in prison, the different meetings that you go to, who's in attendance, that can affect your attitude. And so I just had to Google this because I thought there was an interesting parallel here to something we're talking about. We're talking about attitude. And I thought about flying. My brother's getting his pilot's license right now. He's got some solo stuff coming up here soon. But anyway, I've heard them talk about attitude. So I had to look it up. In flying, apparently attitude, or the indicator on that, the gauge, it talks about the difference between the angle of your aircraft and the Earth's horizon. So that's the thing you see on the dash in the cockpit or whatever. And it shows how it's angled differently from the Earth. If you're, you know, making a turn, maybe the attitude has changed. I don't know if exactly how that works. Some of you pilots, if you want to correct me there, but it's interesting that the attitude is the position we're taking compared to reality. Maybe, you know, are we lined up with the Earth? Are we lined up with the ground, with reality, with what's really there? Or are we off on that stuff? So our attitude I've learned more about attitude in this last 20 minutes than I have in my whole life, I think, because we're saying experiences maybe come first. We're children. We kind of have a blank slate. Then we have thoughts. I'm no good. My mom doesn't love me, whatever we might think in the moment. If we internalize those into negative beliefs, and then it starts to get into our body, it's emanating this energy and people feel it, and it affects then what we do. So talk about actions and how that our actions, the end of the cycle. If it starts with, say, experiences, is that kind of the ending of it?
Well, I mean, I don't know, growing up, you know, you always hear, little quips like, you bring about what you think about or whatever, you know, and then there's the manifestation stuff that goes in deeper to it, like with The Secret or whatever. And, you know, I mean, that's true, man, because, you know, you bring about what you think about because you know, that's the cycle, right? You're thinking about this. And then that is like Jimmy said, you guys were talking about in one of your other episodes where, you know, how you go in to a situation mentally prepared or mentally anxious or whatever, it's going to change the entire experience and dynamic of everything. And so you might take the same actions, but if your attitude is different, if you have an attitude of angst versus confidence and you take the same actions, you're going to have a different experience depending on what the attitude was to begin with. Right. And so, you know, going into a podcast, like look at the last episode we did together. I was cussing and anxious and I was really nervous and I was wound up and I was tired and all these other things. And, you know, my attitude going into those shows was dramatically different than it was, you know, doing this one per se, because I'm more relaxed and confident now. My attitude is different. And on both situations or both circumstances, I was excited, but my attitude was different. So I behaved different. And, you know, I took the same action. I did the interview, right? Or I did the conversation, but now my experience is going to be different than it was last time. And, you know, and then with a different experience after the fact, when I'm done with this and I process the conversation that we have, my thoughts are going to be different this time than they were last time. And then
thoughts are different. Your beliefs are different. Your attitude's different. Your actions are different. And the outcome or the experience is different. Right.
And that I effectively think that's one of the only forms of evolution that we can experience. Like evolution, you know, I don't think we evolved from monkeys or whatever, you know what I mean? Like that's, even though I'm like largely based out of a science perspective, or beliefs. But, you know, as humans, I think that's one of the only ways we can actually evolve is through this little cycle.
Like within our own lifespan here, we evolve within the season of our life. We evolve within our own experiences. This is the 3rd episode that we've done, and this is evolution within this experience. So we have the experience. Those are the results that kind of shows us something, and then we have to interpret it. Those are our thoughts. Our thoughts are the conclusions we make about the situation, and we just keep going around in this cycle. I'm curious about how can we know when our attitude is messed up and like we're having a bad experience. Everybody's difficult. You know, we're at the thing, we're doing the stuff and it's not going well. A lot of times we see other people, well, that person's being rude and this person's not pulling their weight or whatever our complaint is. But how do we know what to check in ourselves?
Well, I guess before I answer that, I while you were saying that, you know, I kind of, as far as the end of the cycle goes, I think thoughts are the end of the cycle. I think, you know, the thought is the beginning and the end. I think that's where it starts because the experience is what comes after the action. And then that's what generates the thought. And the thought is how we process the experience. And that's how we develop the belief. And so in my mind, that's how the cycle ends. And then, when it comes to having a bad attitude, like, there's a bunch of examples, again, like in my experiences with like prison or, you know, running a business or starting a business or being a father. But on a general sense, on a daily general basis, let's say you go to work for 3 days. Your boss has been sideways with everyone because he's stressed for whatever reason. So he's inadvertently been chewing everyone out, you know, for no reason, and being a poor leader. And so what that does to you is it creates thoughts, and then you start to believe some of the negative connotations that he's thrown out there. And then that shifts your attitude into a more, negative attitude. That negative attitude is emitted by your behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're lacking leadership now. You're lacking self-confidence or whatever it is.
Discipline or whatever, yeah.
Right. And then now you're taking actions that are, not conducive to, a good work environment or a good product at work. And then you experience more negative stuff from your boss, which lead to more negative thoughts. And then that compounds in a complex way to create more negative beliefs that are even deeper. And now you're creating layers of self-doubt and
it starts to stack up. It starts to like compound on top of you. And
yeah, I mean, you have a bunch of negative books and you just create a stack of books. Eventually that stack's just going to fall over and the weight's going to come crashing down.
Mm-hmm.
And so
we can't always control the experience. The boss comes into work or whatever, and there's a history, and he's got his bad attitude today. So the experiences can come to us without our choosing. How our parents treat us when we're kids to how our spouse or, boss or coworkers treat us. We can't always control that. But we can catch the thought. A really influential man for me talked about a bird can land on your head, but you don't have to let it build a nest. So that's maybe the difference between thoughts and beliefs. So a thought comes in that says, I'm no good, or this guy hates me, or whatever the thought is. If I can just be aware of that, the words in my head, if I can be aware of that thought happening, how do we change it? How do we not think it? I think it's just to know, I just said this to myself. I just have this dialogue with me. I just had this thought. I just had an image of this. It's the bird that landed on my head. But I'm not going to keep it there because that's not a true thought. I don't want to identify with that. I'm not a loser. I'm actually a pretty awesome person, and I'm pretty capable, and sometimes things are difficult. So now I can shape my thoughts a little bit. But if we're trying to interrupt this cycle and improve the outcomes that we have, we're trying to improve our attitude, I think sometimes we have to say, all right, then if thoughts and beliefs and attitude and feelings and actions come out of my experiences, I need a different experience. I need to win. I need to reach one goal. I need to have one thing accomplished. I need to start to show myself experiences. So that it's kind of comes out of action too, but does that make sense what I'm saying? We can't always control the external event, the external experience. But if we know experiences shape us, we might need to go have some good ones.
Yeah, man. And I've said this before on the show, I think, and I preach this to anyone who I mentor, who's in my immediate life. And it's not only a phrase, but I mean, literally probably like a mantra in my life is, if you can't change it, change the way you think about it. And, if you dissect that, I cannot change the fact that I'm on parole for the rest of, this decade. But what I can change is how I think about it, how I approach it, and how I act, and what my attitude is about it. And the last time I was on parole, it was a terrible experience for me, for them, for everybody. And it was my attitude, it was my behaviors, it was my actions that created that. And that was all created by the beliefs that came from my thoughts. And now I teach classes and mentor men and stuff for the Department of Corrections while on parole. I'm helping them, and with mindset and with, resourcefulness and stuff for these men getting out of prison. and they look to me like, you know, I don't know, as a resource to help their parolees while I'm on parole.
So how is that different? So I can imagine that's a stark contrast from the last time you were on parole. What were the thoughts then? So now you're saying the beliefs maybe, I'm not a victim. I'm a resource. I've figured some things out and I can help other people. Those are some beliefs. You start to embody that in your attitude. There's energy with it that affects your actions. You flew down here on your own dime, comes down here, you know, separates from family for a few days to come and do some work because, you know, I have a message. I have something to share. I've figured some things out. But what was the belief or the thoughts before? What didn't work about your experience before? If you're saying it begins with attitude and thoughts and beliefs, what did you think about yourself and the parole board and that whole system and the, you know, justice correctional system? What did you think about it then?
So my thoughts on the justice system and the correction system has never changed. I've never thought that was, well, let me word this correctly. Like, I think that the justice system is broken in a lot of areas, but with my case specifically, I think I got exactly what I deserved. I've always felt that way. And I know, and I've never denied that I was acting as if I were an idiot. Right. And so, all of those issues stemmed from me not knowing my value as a man or a father or a son, or not having any self-worth, just loaded with shame. And you know, it was just, there's a lot going on. And my last trip to prison, I unpacked a lot of that stuff. And you know how when you've got like this extra room at your house just full of crap, or your garage or whatever full of crap, and you've got boxes on boxes on boxes full of crap, and you want all of it. Like at some point you wanted all of it, you know, because there's monetary value in some of it. Like you spend money on that, you want to keep it. There's sentimental value, and then there's just this weird hoarder value, you know, and so I had all this crap, you know, in my mental garage, you know, and I didn't want to unpack and go through any of it. Last stint in prison, I unpacked all of it, and I went through every piece of it. And I addressed it all. I didn't repress anything. And, you know, I mean, that was hard. It's still hard. And, you know, I got out of prison this time, and this is the first time I've spoke about this, but to almost anyone, but, immediately I was under investigation for new felonies. I was interrogated. I got polygraphed. I mean, it was a huge deal, and I lost some of the ground that I had made. I mean, I kind of reverted, and these people, like screw this situation. Like you reverted back to a negative belief, you're saying? Yeah. And, you know, and I think, it wasn't necessarily a negative belief, but it was so close and so scary. I was preparing myself to go back to prison. And this was right after we made one of our episodes. I think 4 days later, I was hooked up to a lie detector machine. Wow. At the sheriff's office. I mean, it was a bad deal, and that messed up my mindset a little bit, and I was terrified. I mean, I could have ran. I could have bounced, you know, I could have, there's a million things I could have done. I could have started using and said, F it, you know, I'm going to do what I want, because going back to prison anyways, I might as well go out with a bang, you know? But I didn't. I just ignored it. It created a lot of maybe depression and stuff, some anxiety and, you know, other things that I had to like kind of control the best I could. But once the investigation was over and it went from the detectives to the prosecutor said that there wasn't enough to move forward. So they're just going to close the case.
Wow.
And then it was still, 3 weeks after that, I was still kind of rebounding from that. I mean, it was almost like a hangover, like, what do they call it? The adrenaline crash after a traumatic experience, So, I think I've come back from that now, but, the me from 5 years ago would not have handled it that way. And so I don't think it's just in my thoughts. I think it's in beliefs is the core strength behind your attitude, because I believed in myself. I believed in the objectiveness of the situation. I knew the facts, I knew the truth, and I knew what was going on. But I also believed, in my higher power. I believed in my family, and I believed in my trajectory. And maybe I'm not like 100% accurate in some of my beliefs or whatever, man, but those beliefs were so solid inside of me, and the beliefs are not hope, but trust and faith and confidence. And so I was confident enough in these areas. I almost broke, it was a struggle, but that's what led to the attitude of, and I talked to a couple of family members like you and stuff, and everyone was really impressed with my confidence and getting through things. And
dang, so you're days out of prison. I mean, weeks, months, whatever short time, being investigated for new stuff.
Yeah.
That even being charged, you would go back. I think you were saying that's one of the things about parole, is that even if you're charged, whether or not you're convicted, you could be incarcerated again.
You will be incarcerated.
You will be incarcerated just with a charge. And so that alone would be devastating. So you felt some hopelessness for a minute. There were some temporary thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Oh shit. Like this is a bad deal. Am I going to be able to endure this? This isn't fair. There's probably all these things you were thinking. But you went back to some beliefs that got you here. And the beliefs are, it's going to work out. I can just trust in the universe. I can trust the process. I can trust in myself. I know who I am. I also noticed, because of our conversations in that, you were also saying, and even if it goes sideways, even if somehow I know the truth, but even if it doesn't play out that way for me, I'm going to maintain myself. I'm going to keep myself in order. I'm going to discipline my actions. I'm just going to do what I got to do and keep moving. I already know everybody there. It's going to be fine. Right? Like that's that would seem to be your attitude. Like, I hate this. I hope it's not what it could be, but even if that happens, I'm going to be all right.
Yeah. And, and now that I think about it, that the first interrogation happened before you and I recorded the last episode. And I even referenced it in the episode. I said, even if I go back to prison for a BS parole violation, like, I'll be all right. It's not going to break me down. I'm not going to change my attitude. I'm not going to change, the way I'm living my life, because it doesn't matter where I'm at. I can live my life the same way. Because you're not living your life based on, again, like the monetary value, your financial success, or the accolades that you have in your career or academics or whatever. You're living your life based on who you are. And just because I go back to prison doesn't mean I need to change the way I live my life. My life's mine, and it's.
So what was the energy of that? I was saying earlier, and I think I'm onto some brilliance here. By the way, some of this, we're just kind of spitballing some of these concepts and whatever, but those beliefs, I'm going to be okay, I'm going to be fine, I'm going to do what I have to do, those are beliefs that you had worked on, I guess, throughout your, prison and throughout this recovery that you've done. What did it feel like in your body? So I'm saying attitude is an emotional and sensory component. There's sensory, energy in your body happening. So when you're saying, I'll do what I have to do, I will be okay, I'm going to hope for the best and just take whatever's coming. That's your attitude. Those are your beliefs. How did that affect your the feelings in your body. You're actually what's going on in your heart, your muscles. I'm sure there's tension, but I bet that helped you be a little calmer in your like nervous system to say, oh, well, I'll have to, whatever happens will happens.
Well, yeah. I mean, physiologically, I think the only thing happened is my hair got more gray.
It's going to look like me. You know, the genetics, you can see what's coming.
Hey, after that whole thing, you can definitely see gray hair on the side of my head now. But, so I have small children, I've got kids that have no idea, that was going on. That would rearrange some stuff in their heads if that would have happened. I'm sure of it. And so I had to be strong for them because they didn't know what was going on, and I didn't want them to see what was going on. Right. But then also I had to be strong for, my mother, my significant other, and just everyone around me. I have a lot of kids in their early and mid 20s that look up to me. A lot of men, I guess, not kids. And I talk to them on a daily basis, helping them through life and mentoring them and coaching them. And I didn't want what I was going through to affect anyone else. And it did for a little bit. And once I noticed that, then that's how I rearranged my beliefs, and my attitude was, it wasn't just the positive affirmations of thinking, oh, I will get through this, or I will this, or I will that, or I am this, or I am that. It was, I can't let this happen, and I can't act like this, because if I do, and then I played it through my head, what the domino effect would be. So if I repress this way, or I shut down this way, then my attitude will change, my actions will change, and then everyone's experience around me will change, and then they will be different because of me. And it's almost like the toxic person in the room, right? When you're in a room full of people that are having a good time and have great attitudes, that negative person comes in with the shitty attitude, and they're emitting negative energy. The vibe changes. And I noticed that within my immediate life that was starting to happen, and I was doing everything I could to prevent those things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And so, and I wasn't perfect at it. I kind of reverted back to pre-drugs. I was very like disciplinarian, militaristic, very strict, very like
controlled, and
yeah, like there was a lot of situations where I was very strict with the kids and my significant other, and I was just kind of a no bullshit like kind of dude for a couple of weeks. And I reversed that, but
like that was a little too rigid or something. Like you were trying to be, there's some good intention there, but it maybe became a little too heavy or a little too serious about some of those things, and you kind of scaled back. So I'm hearing a belief in there that what's happening right now is as important or more important than the potential thing that could happen in the future, the big, scary, ugly thing that's out there. What's happening right now, these people, this situation, this home, this is what matters to me. And so I have to maintain myself better. I have to maintain myself to a certain level of, healthiness. And that's more important to me than what could come in the future. There's a belief there that starts to settle, because you would have had to settle your energy. I'm doing a lot of work lately with my clients with some different types of therapy and stuff on just noticing what is happening in your body. I did this little exercise with Jimmy about, and I want to do it with you while your phone is recording, but it's where I'm having you guess, what is the battery on your phone? They're both plugged in right now, so it's 100%.
Yeah.
But I find that often people can really tell. They know in the back of their head, roughly within about 10 points on the scale, how much battery they have on their cell phone. It's in their pocket, and they know what it is. But we don't have any idea what's going on in our body. So you start to check your beliefs. You start to get back to, you throw those old negative thoughts away. And the ones that had been sticking to the wall were the ones that said, my family's important to me. I need to maintain myself here and now today. The things happening in the present are more important than the things that could happen in the future. There's a lot of belief structure that helps you stay calm and cool, your attitude, and then what are the actions? What actions did you take? So you recognize that you were being a little too strict or whatever it was. You get your attitude checked. And then what were you doing in a more positive way after that? What were the actions?
So how it came to my attention was Kimmy actually was the one that brought it to my attention multiple times, actually. And it was the spite. And it was a very hard time for everyone involved. I mean, this is a scary time.
Major big stuff on the line.
Yeah. Everyone just got me back, and I'm looking at 15 years. And even if I don't get that 15 years, I'm still looking at least 1 year going back for sure. At this point in time, there was a 95% chance I was going back for a year. And so, I mean, it was a catastrophic event, or potentially catastrophic event. And, so in my mother and Kimmy bringing this to my attention, in their own ways, I started making subtle changes, and then I would kind of fall back, and it wasn't an immediate fix. But if, for instance, if the children were acting up in a way that like triggered me to say, hey, knock it off, or criticize them or chastise them or correct them in an abrasive way, I would stop, look at her, and say, hey, you need to go deal with that. Like, I don't have the capacity to deal with that right now.
I know my limit. I'm at the limit, and I need your help.
And in this period of time, like, her and I knew what was going on, and we knew that I needed help in certain areas. And not only that, I'm 4 weeks out of prison, so I'm rigid anyways. I mean, I just came out of this toxic environment where, if you lived around me, you knew I wasn't the dude, right? Like, I don't like playing games. I don't like people in general. And now I'm in prison, and I really don't like people. And so, it was snapping out of that wasn't as hard as I thought it would be, because I was so excited to be home with the people that I loved and cared about. But, I still had those elemental attributes, and I kind of snapped out of that. And then this investigation happened, and then it was almost like they came back tenfold. But, one thing that I was proud of myself with, even though I wasn't proud of that mindset and that attitude that I was in, I didn't go to the way that I see relapses and stuff is the way that I saw it for myself. I just read my journal from a couple of years ago. And one of the things that I said in there was, when I didn't feel safe, the only place that I felt safe was in the mental state of inactive use. And so getting high was my safe place for a long time. Or not a long time, but when I felt in danger or when I felt whatever. And so that's not where my head went. Not once during that period did I think about like running to drugs or inebriating myself so I didn't have to deal with it. So I was proud of myself for reverting back to a safe place that was pre-drugs, right? And drugs never showed up on the map. Yeah. So that was really cool for me, and that realization that I had just a few weeks ago, actually. But then once my actions, once I started like coming out of these rigid or toxic behaviors, one thing that I did to kind of curb all this was I would look at what was being brought up by whoever, said, hey, you need to soften up here, or you need to check this, or you need to do this because it's creating this. I would not just let it go in one ear and out the other. I wouldn't take it as negative criticism. I would take it as constructive criticism, and I would act on it. Through the first 28 years of my life, if anybody brought that kind of stuff to me, I would look at it as criticism, negative criticism, chastising, whatever. But because of the journey that I went on through prison, and because of the self, care and self-work that I did, I now can look at criticism differently. And so, no one's perfect. I'm not perfect, but things are dramatically better now that stressful situation's gone. And, for anyone that goes through stuff like this, whether it be an event like that, right? Or an event like, you've just been diagnosed to be terminally ill, you're losing everything. And how are you going to address that? What's your attitude going to be on that? What are the thoughts that are going to stick to the wall when you throw them, And I think sometimes we can choose what we put our faith into, like what thoughts we put our faith into to turn them into a belief.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we might, make those choices or make those decisions based on selfishness, sometimes selflessness, whatever, and not even realize we're doing it. But it's the ones that stick that we turn into beliefs that are interesting, because those could be negative or positive. And when they stick, we don't know why they stick, but now they're a belief, right? And so I think self-awareness, if you had you had a little bit of a bridge between belief and attitude, and you had awareness in there, I think that self-awareness is what's going to help shape the attitude. That makes sense?
Yeah, it does. So here's an example here too of, okay, well, I need a new experience. Well, you just came through this crazy experience of prison, success, check mark, you completed it. And now you're facing this other stuff, and the experience was very trying, that must have been very difficult. But the actual experience, the outcome is, it's all good. They let you come to Vegas.
Yeah.
You passed the polygraph. There's no charges. You're just going to continue on the path that you've been on. Right? Is that the situation? And then you said, yeah, I want to go to Vegas. And they're like, yeah, you're good. So you've had an experience that said, I can manage myself. I can manage my action. I can control my attitude. I can take adjustment. You got the feedback from your family members who, and you kind of like, okay, you accepted their, whatever they prompted you to do, or to chill on this or that. I want to wrap this up here in a few minutes, but we're talking about attitude and how that kind of fits into the whole cycle of what we're doing. We're saying we have experiences, we have temporary thoughts about that experience, and those, we decide whether or not we keep those thoughts and turn them into beliefs, which are kind of engraved in our heart and mind. That's how we see ourselves in the world and what's going to happen, our capacity. We turn that into some kind of energy that starts to produce behavior, our actions, and then our actions lead to outcomes. That's the experience. And so what a good example of that, man. I wanted to talk about, from the Red 9, just a couple of things. So on beliefs. So through this, if we're trying to correct our life, if we're trying to course correct, as Jimmy talks about, we may need to say, hey, I need to have some experiences. I need a win. I need to go do something that proves to me that I can be okay. Or we may say, I need to look at my thoughts. What are these birds landing on my head? What am I throwing against the wall? What am I thinking in this situation? But beliefs, so there's a few beliefs in here based on responsibility. I'm not a victim. I'm not a villain. I can be reliable. I can maintain boundaries. I'm the kind of person who can admit when I'm wrong. I can make amends. I can accept things I can't control. A lot of those are beliefs, basically. And many of these other things are, but So we may need to have experiences that we change and we like curate or produce these experiences for ourselves. Or we may start with, I got to fix my thinking, my stinking thinking. I got to fix this and recognize it's like the ticker tape on the news, that runs on the bottom of the TV. I'm hearing these things happen in my head. Do I agree with it or not? Do I believe that? Am I going to turn that into something? If my beliefs need to change, I go back to start to say, and I got this from Taco Mike, who got this from his wife. I am the kind of person who can endure hard things. I'm the kind of person who can deal with injustice. If this turns out to be this unfair situation for me, I've dealt with that before. And I've produced a lot of injustice. So like, I'm okay. I recognize that I'm just a person circling around this earth like everybody. And maybe we need to, maybe then the attitude, we look at that. So awareness, we're aware of what's going on in my body. Man, I really have a lot of anger right now. I'm feeling this anger. I have an angry attitude because of the physical sensation in my body. Or I'm doing stupid stuff. My actions need to change. So there's a lot of places to enter this cycle, to interrupt it. You mentioned earlier that there's no beginning necessarily. The good news about that is we can jump in and fix this wherever we want to. What's happening in my world, the spin that's happening is not okay, and I don't like what's happening. What do I believe about myself? What are the things I'm thinking in the moment? What's happening in my body? What are the steps that I'm taking? That's what you're doing. That's why you're winning, bro. You're aware of all of those things. And I've seen you in a couple of situations where there was frustration. We were talking through that experience where you were being questioned on stuff and whatever, and I could tell that this was diminishing your like human energy, your masculine power. I could tell it was pulling it down. But you're fighting with that. And you're aware of it. And you're saying, yeah, but you're saying I'm so much better now. I'll do what I have to do. I'm going to correct myself. I'm going to take the feedback. So you are the embodiment, man, of attitude. We're talking about crazy things happen to you as a child that set you in a bad set of beliefs. The fat white kid and whatever that stuff that you talked about. And those beliefs became energy in your like physical presence. That turns into behavior that got you in all kinds of trouble. And you somewhere along the line, I mean, and maybe we'll wrap up with this thought about in all that you've been through from, childhood and adolescence to prison and all that stuff, where in this cycle did you really where did you re-enter the game? Was it experiences? Did something just happen out of the blue? They're like, hey, I see life different now. Or did you choose it and intentionally kind of like hone yourself so that you start to get in a better rhythm? Where did you enter that cycle again?
So that's an interesting thought. So the way that I was thinking about the cycle until right now was situationally, right?
Okay.
Or daily, like on a smaller.
This is the moment, the small experience is happening. More of
a quantified scale.
Yeah.
Or atomic scale almost.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at it on a big picture, on a 10-year cycle or a 15-year cycle, I mean, ultimately you could see that, you had this attitude through this 5-year stretch. And then, on average, these were your actions, and that led to these experiences, which led to these overall thoughts. And so if you think about it on a large spectrum like that, roll it in let's say, again, 5 to 10 year cycles. It was a pretty negative cycle until I was 32. And then it was the experience of Nelson, of my dad, my stepdad, is the experience of Nelson almost dying that changed all of my thoughts. And I think I depicted that in the last episodes.
Yeah, that was cool.
He and I didn't get along. We didn't see eye to eye for a long time. We didn't really, it was just a standard stepdad, stepkid relationship because of me, right? Had had not a lot to do with him or his parenting or anything or his contribution. It was completely based on my attitude
And your actions.
and my actions. And, you know, I mean, I was a shit stick kid in Las Vegas, stealing credit cards and selling them and doing stupid stuff and doing, you know, and just this hellion. And then through my 20s, just, you know, I didn't need help from family. I didn't need anybody else. And so I created more drama through actions and not inappropriate thoughts, but, you know, thoughts that weren't conducive to success, right? I was trying, but because, you know, of my track history, I mean, I don't know. It was a negative time. And so, and then I forcefully, against the grain, made a little bit of success, but then the negative beliefs and thoughts and stuff were still in me. And so that's, boom, led to drug addiction, which led to prison, which led to everything else. And then when Nelson almost died, it was an experience that led to different thoughts. Now, that might not be true for everybody. You know, you could call it experience, I guess, but like I've mentored people both in prison and lately, where a conversation, which I guess would be experience, a conversation would lead to a string of thoughts that lead to different beliefs that change their attitude. You know, these kids that are 20, they're struggling on a level that I don't understand, because even though I'm 36, they have gone through things in life that I don't get. You know, COVID as a teenager or whatever. Like, I don't understand those things. I haven't had that experience to create different thoughts and beliefs and stuff. So, but, you know, conversations that I have with people that change their thoughts and beliefs and attitude, I think is helping them immensely early on in life, and they don't have to wait until they're almost 40 and go through prison and stuff. So
now you're meeting people on a plane.
Yeah.
You know, a woman who's vomiting and is having this turbulent kind of flight experience, and she's recognizes the work that you're a part of. You know, she's saying, hey, my husband listens, and look, he's excited that I'm talking to you. And that's got to create some thoughts like, man, this is good. I'm in a good spot. There's creating some temporary thought that's going to continue to become more and more and more kind of cement the beliefs in that you're a worthwhile dude. You're highly intelligent. You're a person with some integrity. You didn't always have that. You know, when you're ripping people off and doing whatever things came along with drug use and all those things. And now you're having experiences that continue the whole cycle. I love it, man. You had to, at some point, make some decisive, like, shifts in how I'm going to look at myself and look at life. There was a thought maybe that came after you found out about he was going to die or that he was not doing well. There's a thought that becomes a belief. Maybe there's stuff in there about life is too short. I don't know. What were the things that came out of that? Like the cognitive pieces of that. I don't want to lose someone.
Yeah. I mean,
what I do matters. I mean,
that was the catalyst, I guess, you know, and I guess, excuse language, but literally the question I asked myself is, what the fuck are you doing here? Where are you at right now? You're on lockdown in prison, like, you know, and then where's your dad? You know, it was a crazy story. They had to spend tens of thousands of dollars to get him out of Mexico because Mexico wouldn't treat him unless they paid cash, and they had to put him on a private air ambulance thing, and like just broke, financially broke, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, everything broke everyone. And you know, it was just, and what could I do? You know, I mean, I don't know. It just, I guess initially, like, the thoughts were I didn't want to lose someone, but then I started asking myself questions as far as like, who are you? Why are you here? What are you doing? Like, when I asked myself that initial question, what the fuck are you doing here? That led to, seriously answer the question. Why are you here? What are you doing here? And what are you going to do from this point on? And how are you going to change to make sure that the next time you get here, because, I don't know if you'll remember this, but a couple of years before that, Mark almost died.
Mm-hmm.
And that affected me, and that was my first thought, I guess, in answering the question was, your uncle almost died a couple of years ago. You got out, came right back. Your dad almost dies. So what's next? Your kid almost dies and you're going to be here, it's COVID at that time. So they're not giving out furloughs for anything. Like, you're not getting a furlough to a funeral. You're not. So what, you're just going to have to, like in the movies, there's plenty of movies where there's the scene where the kid gets out of prison as a man, goes to the dad's grave, talks to him for a minute and leaves. Like, that's the last thing that I'm going to be able to do with my dad? No. That's the last thing I'm going to be able to do with my child or whatever? No. And
man, it seems like you tapped into something very, I don't know, like primal, or just the idea of mortality. You're saying, I'm a resource. I'm a person who's connected to other people. Right now I'm disconnected. I need to be with them. I need to be available to them. I want to see them. I love them. I can be better. I mean, they're just, and maybe some of this is even unconscious, but clearly you made the changes, clearly you turned some things around in your attitude. I want to wrap this up for now, you guys. The reason we're talking about this is just because, we're not all broken. If you're getting this premium content right now, you're not a super busted up person. Probably you're just trying to fine tune, but it doesn't matter what level you're at. If we're talking about a person in prison, or the executive who's trying to figure out how to handle his family situations better, if you are not aware of how you do the things you do, it's not going to change. So what we're presenting is a little bit of a model that say, you have some thoughts. Andy's suggesting that it all begins and ends with thought. The thought is the bird that lands on your head. The thought is the thing that you throw against the wall. It's a short term, it's a sentence in your head. It's a picture in your head. It's a brief belief, a brief thought. When those things kind of stick to the wall, when you let the bird on your head build a nest, those start to become beliefs. And our beliefs turn into an attitude. That's what people feel. It's an embodiment. It's an emotional and sensory embodiment of the belief. And that's kind of the fuel that pushes you in the machine toward action, and that determines your outcome. So we appreciate you being with us. Remember to like, follow, share this with people. I think we're doing high quality stuff here. I think it's improving all the time, just the content that we're talking about, the people that we talk to, and how we produce this out. But we would love your input. We love your feedback. Share it with us. And until next time, no excuses, Alpha.
There you go. Yeah, that was a good one. That was longer than I thought it would be.
Well, I was glad.
If you're a man that controls his own destiny, a man that is always in the pursuit of being better, you are in the right place. You are responsible. You are strong. You are a leader. You are a force for good. Gentlemen, you are the Alpha, and this is the Alpha Quorum.